Is this seat taken? Can I sit? Can I? Oh, no? You're saving it for, okay. I'll leave. I didn't know if I wanted to do like a story time type thing, but like I started thinking about this recently because it's still kind of relevant. And this is the worst day of my adult life. So far. The bar for like a bad has been raised pretty high, so this is probably going to be my worst day for a long time. And I'm not like sad or mad about it or anything anymore, because it did happen almost a year ago. I just think it's a funny story, and like everything that could have gone wrong probably did, except for me like losing a limb or dying, which I suppose both could have happened. Here we fucking go. Bit of backstory. One of the jobs that I have is working for a chain coffee store. I'm not gonna say the name of it because I am still employed there. Through this coffee shop, I get benefits, and they're good. It's as good as like medical benefits can be for that type of job. I'm not mad about that. The only frustrating part was there was a point in time a year ago where I was pretty fucking bogged mentally. Of course, I was like, oh fuck, I need help. And I sought out a therapist, and the only problem was the only therapist that was had an open schedule and accepted my insurance was down in Rochester, which is about an hour from where I live. And I was making that drive once a week initially, and then once every 2 weeks, and then once a month. It was, even still, like, that's quite a lot to be putting on my car. And I was doing it in the mornings, and that's kind of a far drive to be making in the mornings. You know, an hour drive is that's not ideal for just an hour visit and then going back up. It didn't work. I was mostly okay with it. I never missed an appointment. I never had any real issues, but that puts a lot of wear on your car, especially up here in Minnesota. It's like there was no reason for me to be doing that. It just didn't work. So that kind of gets us to what actually happened. This was last December. This was a cold day in December for Minnesota, which isn't even our coldest month, but I think it was about -5 or -10 outside. I don't think that's what it was for the whole day. So I make my drive down to Rochester to do my therapy appointment, and it's a therapy appointment, you know, I'm talking about my feelings. And I get out and I go to start my car, and it's totally fine starting, but the weird thing is when I start to pull out and my car is doing some floppy shit, you know, it's going fump on one side of my car, and I'm like, oh my god, do I have a flat tire? And oh my god, I had a flat tire. So I pull off into some parking lot. I know how to change a flat tire. I kind of start that process. I'm on the phone with my dad, and he's like, hey, how's it going? I'm like, well, flat tire. And he's like, oh no. And it's just like totally cool. But I'm on the phone with my dad, and I'm trying to get the tire off my car, which there's totally a good chance that I could have been dumb. I thought that may have been the case in this situation, but I'm like, I have the car jacked up. I'm like, it's quite up there. It's not like overextended or anything, but it is off the ground on that corner of the car. And I'm like pulling on this tire, and I'm like, damn, this fucking tire does not want to come off. And I'm like, what the fuck do I do? And I'm like on and off the phone, and I'm like, I can't get this tire off. And he's like, well, did you get all the lugs off? I'm like, yeah, I did. And I still can't figure out what's wrong. And my phone, I'm very fortunate, my phone was at 67%, so that wasn't going to be an issue. And then it was a fucking issue. I had my phone at 67% 1 minute, I set it down on my hood, and then I pick it back up and it's at 2%, and then it died. So that was a problem. My phone at the time was pretty busted. I broke the charging port at one point, and it is a Samsung phone that supports wireless charging. The only problem is wireless charging can do a lot of poor things to a battery, and so it totally like fried my battery mostly. So now I don't have a phone. My car is jacked up in a parking lot. It's cold as fuck. I'm not dressed for the right weather. because I assumed that I was going to go down and then come back up and it wasn't going to be an issue. I wasn't going to be outside and I was going to go back home and do some other shit that day. No, I have a spare. It's a full-size spare, thankfully. So I'm sitting there and I'm like, it's cold as fuck. Maybe the tire is frozen on, which I'm from Texas. That's not like something they teach you. Eventually I'm like, okay, fuck this. Like that's the moment the panic started to set in, was when I was like, okay, I can't be having this issue. So I pulled a hammer out of the back of my car and I used like the pry bit from the back side of it and had it wedged like right in like the wheel well or whatever, in just the right way to where I could pry the tire off, and that worked. I had like the perfect fulcrum for getting this tire off, and I was like, oh my fucking god, it was frozen on, holy shit. So I get my spare, and I'm putting the spare on there, and I'm trying to fit the lugs on there, and I have my lug wrench that comes with all the cars, and I'm like trying to tighten it on. I'm like, I can't get the fucking lug wrench to work here. That's an issue too. I just assumed, oh, like the space is for the lugs. It's pretty narrow. Like I probably just need like a different wrench to fit these in. I get a wrench, like just a plain wrench, like a handle wrench, and I tighten it on there the best I can, and I look at it and I go, this is horrifying, but this is the best we've got. I put down the jack and I put the jack back in my car and I slam all the doors and I'm like, all right, now it's time to find an auto shop. And what I end up doing, because I don't have a phone, okay, and I just start driving down like a metropolitan street, and I'm not going fast. I'm going maybe 15 or 20 miles an hour. I have my hazards on, and there are cars like going around me, and I'm like, there is nothing I can do. I'm so sorry. And I end up finding an auto shop like right up the road, and I'm like, oh my god. There's a gas station across the street that has an air pump, and I'm like, okay, well, I need to get this spare tire inflated as well. No, can't do that. The air pump is actually completely salted over because it's that season. You can't do that, apparently. I go inside to the gas station and I buy like a phone cord, which cost me like almost $20. Oh my god. So then we limp across the street to the auto shop. I roll up in there and I ask the guy at the desk, I'm like, okay, here's my situation. And I tell him everything that had happened, and he's like, well, let's go take a look. And so we get out there and he takes one look at the tire and he goes, oh yeah, this is an aftermarket spare, and the stock lugs aren't going to fit on this. Many years before this, there was a spare tire in that car. We brought it to Discount Tire to get the spare changed back to a normal tire. The way that we had paid for stuff for Discount Tire, we were supposed to get another spare. And I didn't even realize that I didn't have a spare until like maybe a year after that. And so we go back to Discount Tire and we're like, hey, you never gave us another spare. And they're like, yeah, probably not. It happens. They're totally aware that they fuck up sometimes like a human, and that's awesome that they just gave us a spare. But the spare tire they gave us was this aftermarket spare that there was no fucking way I was gonna get on my car. So thanks for the free tire. What the hell though, that sucks. So I'm in this situation where the guy's like, yeah, those lugs aren't gonna fit. I'm like, well, do you guys have aftermarket lugs? And he's like, well, I can ask. And so he goes into the shop and he asks a mechanic that's in there and he's like, do we have any aftermarket lugs? And the dude's like, probably not. And they didn't. My hair's all fucked up. I'm very tired at this point because I got down there, my appointment ended at 11 and I planned on being back in town by like noon. It was already like 1:30 and I was like still in Rochester and I'm like, fuck. I don't know what to do. And he's like, well, let me like make a couple calls to some of the other auto shops around the area. And I'm like, okay. So I'm chilling in the lobby for I think like an hour and a half. I'm just sitting there. I'm on my phone a little bit. I'm like mostly charging my phone because I had like a portable battery or whatever. My setup for charging that phone was ghetto as hell though, because I had a car wireless charger like that clamps onto the phone plugged into a battery bank. It was on life support. Thankfully, eventually, they get a hold of someone in town who has aftermarket lugs. Awesome, fuck yeah. I just want to get out of here. I don't give a fuck about how much it costs. So we get the aftermarket lugs, which they have to drive them over from another shop. Totally fine at this point. I've already waited, so I don't care. I'm waiting. They get the aftermarket lugs on the aftermarket tire. They couldn't get some of the stock lugs off of the car though, cool. Like I didn't even put that much effort into it, but it's cool. It's fine. This isn't even the big problem. They get enough. They get enough to where it's gonna hold on fine. It's okay. And I'm like, lit, okay. And I go, can you air up the tire? And I guess this was for some reason a problem, but they didn't end up airing up the tire. It's just that was a weird thing to give me flack about. It aired up the tire, it didn't matter. At this point, I'm like, oh my God, I can get out of town. Hell yes. And I go to start my car and it kind of chugs a little bit. And I'm like, please don't fucking die on me. Because this is kind of what it had been doing in the season. It would kind of like, some starter troubles, you know. It happens. It's cold. Whatever. My car has 200,000 miles on it from Texas and it's in Minnesota. And it was in like negative temps. I get it. Baby's fine. So I get it started and I'm like, don't fucking die on me. We start driving and I'm like on Snapchat, I'm talking about what's happened. I'm like, God damn, today sucks. What the fuck? And I'm getting to the sort of halfway town between mine and Rochester, Zumbrota. I stop because I'm like, God damn, this boy's gotta piss. So I stop at a gas station. I get out and go pee. I get back out to my car. We get no chugs. We get nothing. We actually don't get anything turning over. This boy is dead. And it's not the battery. Because the car, I can listen to music in the car. The whole stereo was working fine, and I'm just chilling, listening to Mort Garson in this time. And this was the moment where I probably could have lost my shit, and I did not. There were many times where I totally would have had the right to, given like the way that I had been wronged, but I didn't. I was chilling mostly. Internally I'm like, this fucking sucks, but it's like, what could I do about it? And I know it's not the battery on my car, but that is the one thing that I know I can do that is like something is possible, is to try and get a jump from somebody. And the cool thing about being in Minnesota is if you're at a gas station, especially if you go up to the hood of your car and you pop it, someone is gonna approach you. And that's exactly what happened. A man approached me. This man who was 80 something years old approached me and was like, do you need a jump? And I'm like, yes, I do. I guess. It was kind of weird because he pulled his car next to mine, but our batteries were on the opposite sides of the cars and my jumper cable wasn't long enough for that, neither was his, and so we were just pretty much pretending at that point. And so he's like, well, do you want to ride to another auto shop in the area? I'm like, I guess. We'll ask the guy there, see what he thinks. So I hop in this stranger's car, we go over the bridge, we go to this auto shop. We're talking to the head technician there, and he's just like, oh, well, sounds like your starter's dead. I'm like, that's a meme. Anytime there's something wrong with a car and you want to sound smart, you're like, oh, the starter is bad. But the starter was actually dead on my car, and I thought that was funny. He gives the guy a pry bar, which I had never seen a pry bar before. I guess it's the back end of a crowbar pretty much, but it looked like a gigantic flathead screwdriver, even with the enamel handle, and I was like, that's pretty cool. He gave him that pry bar to whack my starter, and maybe it'll kick something loose and I can get home at least. So that was kind of what happened. The only issue was that the starter is located below a lot of things in my car, so you know, it's going to be a tricky whack. We get back over to my car, which is at this gas station, and we pop the hood again. What they told us to do was to kind of get the ignition a little bit and start whacking the starter. The only issue is what's right above the starter is the solenoid or something, some fucking car thing. And whenever that gets whacked, it shoots sparks out. So the image that's happening right here is me sitting in my car. My hands are completely numb, my hands and feet. And I'm starting to tremble because I'm fucking cold, and like that temperature is starting to set in, and I'm like trying to start my car a little bit while he is whacking something in the front of my car, occasionally firing sparks out of the hood of my car, which I'm sitting there like, is this how I'm gonna die? Just a weird a weird energy there. And I keep going back and forth, like holding a flashlight for him and then getting back in my car and holding a flashlight, and we're just like staring at it like, fuck, dude. And I'm like looking in the hood of my car, and I start looking around the gas station like, this sucks. And I make eye contact with somebody who's getting gas, and this somebody happened to be a regular at the coffee shop that I work at. That is 30 minutes from here, and we make eye contact, and she goes, well, hey, Colin, and I'm like, hello, Julie. She's like, what's happening? I'm like, I'm not having a good day, Julie. And so she comes over, and she starts holding the flashlight for this gentleman. And we continue to whack the starter, even though that isn't doing anything at this point. I'm starting to give up. I just want to go home. I don't give a fuck about my car. I'm running out of options at this point. And so my final point, I'm talking to my regular. We send the old man on his way. I thank him for his help, because I probably wouldn't have gotten this far without him, even if sparks were shooting out of my car. Thank you, sir. I'm sorry that I forgot your name. I'm talking with my regular Julie, and her kids are also there. And I'm like, this is horrible. This is probably the worst situation I've been in. And she's like, well, get in my car, we'll warm up. I gotta wait for my daughter anyways. And I'm like, okay. And I'm warming up in her car, I'm charging my phone. And thankfully, one thing that I do have is roadside assistance through my Verizon wireless plan, which I didn't even know that was a thing, but thank you for that. And it does a tow. There's a pretty good distance on it. It just wouldn't have got it back to my town. So that was good, because it was enough distance to get it to the auto shop. That's my final option. I'm like, well, fuck, I might as well do something. So I call the roadside assistance, and we're telling them my make and model for my car, talking to my regular, talking to Julie. We're just chatting about life a little bit and talking about that stuff, talking to the random roadside representative, and we're like, it's a Honda Accord. And the guy over the phone is like, is that an SUV? And and Julie goes, it's not a fucking SUV. And I'm like, no, it's a Suburban. It is a car. It is a normal car. At this point, it's like 5 o'clock. It has been quite a fucking day. The sun is starting to set. The tow truck driver doesn't get there until like 6:30 or so. I'm like, that's fine. I call the auto shop that I had just been to that gave us the pry bar, and I'm like, hey, my car's fucked. Could you work on it? Could you take a look at it? And he's like, I can. I was like, okay, well, my tow truck driver's not gonna get in here until after 6. Is that cool? He's like, yeah, just drop the keys in the glove box. It's cool. And I'm like, cool. And the tow truck driver gets there. Totally nice dude. He absolutely could have been a grouchy guy, but no, he was totally cool, even though it was like cold and snowing outside. His name was Josh. Thanks, Josh, for towing my car. I really appreciate it. You were super nice. Tows my car over to the auto shop. It's gone. It's not my problem anymore. I don't have to look at it. It's gone. And I hitch a ride back to my town with my regular. Thank Christ that she just happened to be there. I have no fucking clue how I would have gotten home otherwise. So that just happened to work out in that way. But now I'm without a car. So that kind of sucks. The next week is me walking to work. It's cold outside, but like, you know, you pump the legs, they're fine. I walk about a little over half a mile to the coffee shop, and then a little over half a mile from the coffee shop to my other job, because that was just the only way that was gonna work out. It was fine. I made it work. It was okay. That was a very interesting experience, being able to walk around town though, because it's very easy to get like an autopilot with driving, and so being able to like listen to music and having to kind of be present walking around, that was kind of a nice experience. I enjoyed that. So a week later, I got a chance to look at my car. Starter was dead. They switched out the starter. Car starts. Cool. Awesome. That was the problem. The only issue, this is outside of town. This is not a place I can walk to. So now I'm needing a ride to Zimbrota. I don't know how the fuck I'm gonna get a ride to Zimbrota. I was probably just gonna leave it there for a while. I was working a shift at the coffee shop, and one of my old coworkers came and visited, and we're like visiting, and we're like talking, and my car, they call me and tell me my car's ready. I'm like, oh my God, my car's ready. And she's like, yeah, well, I'm gonna take off in a bit. I gotta go see my dad. And I'm like, oh, where's your dad? And she goes, oh, he lives in Zimbrota. And I'm like, do you want to wait like 30 minutes and take me with you? Because I got to pick up my car in Zimbrota. And she's like, yeah, sure. Yeah, I ended up hitching a ride to Zimbrota. And I got my car and it was fixed. I still had the one aftermarket tire on my car. That was almost a year ago, and the reason why this is still relevant is because I still have that one aftermarket tire on my car, and I still don't have a spare tire. So, cool. See, that's the story there. I don't think I've been down there since this, so... Moral of the story is don't drive cars. They fucking break, and like your legs are probably gonna do way better no matter what. So fuck cars, walk everywhere, and fuck tires too. You know, click a thing down there, click a thing down there if you want to, click a thing down there if you want to, click the box down there and like push some fucking buttons type of thing, you know. It's up to you if you want to do. I think it's cool, like whenever people do that, you know, you could be one of those cool people if you want to. It's up to you, but like, you know, it would make you kind of cool if you did that. There's a ladybug on my diffuser for my light. That's super distracting though. Okay, I'll leave it. Wanted to pull my... Okay, now the ladybug's flying around. Dude. This is not... Did he die? What the fuck? He just collapsed.